Hey guys, what's up? This is What the Tech, and this is the brand new 2020 MacBook Air, powered entirely by Apple's own in-house design processor called Apple Silicon. So the MacBook Air is actually a bit of an odd child in this situation here, in the whole transitionary period that Apple just begun. Apple's in the 2-year transition period where they're going to phase out the Intel chips from their lineup and move over to Apple Silicon powered computers. Now, as opposed to the MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air had its entire lineup phased out in favor of the new Apple Silicon processors. This is pretty notable because the MacBook Air is Apple's most popular laptop by far. And compared to the other ones we just mentioned, the Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro, it was only their entry-level configurations that were phased out. And one of the main reasons why it's so interesting that Apple chose to phase out the entirety of the MacBook Air lineup, replace the Intel ones with Apple Silicon processors, is because this is the laptop that most people are going to interface with when they deal with a new Apple laptop. And these are usually the go-to recommendation for someone who wants a really fine, good-looking, competent compute machine. Also something that just works. So the main question here is that does this machine, the M1-powered MacBook Air, accomplish everything that the previous model did, the Intel-powered ones, and then does it do it better? Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes it does. Starting first with design, this part would be quick, and that's because there's no design update this year. Everything about this is just the same as the Intel model you could have bought a month or two ago. The same color options, same industrial design, and the same size bezel. Personally, if you ask me, I don't mind the lack of design update because this is still a pretty good looking machine. All I can imagine them doing is chamfering the edges a bit to make it look more edgy. But one thing that definitely needs to be visited by Apple sometime soon are the bezels. These bezels are pretty dated now compared to what's on the market, and I feel like this is something that can easily make a machine look a lot more modern. Now, looking to day-to-day usage, it was immediately apparent that there were clear benefits from transitioning away from Intel CPUs. We have massive gains in battery life, speed and responsiveness, as well as overall performance. Now, starting first with battery life wise, I was getting usually around 15 to 18 hours before I felt like I had to plug in and charge again. This is closer to what Apple's claims are, and it's nice to see those numbers match up. A cool thing is that even on outlier days where I had heavier stuff such as prolonged Zoom meetings and collaborative projects over the cloud, I was generally looking at maybe 10 hours of battery life, which is a noticeable improvement over the outgoing model. For speed and responsiveness, I was just taken aback by how close the entire interface is in matching the experience that was on my phone or tablet. Launching applications were almost immediate, and it wasn't just for Apple's own native first party either. It was for other third-party apps as well. So obviously things like Apple's own applications such as Pages, iTunes, iMovie, iMessage are super fast and smooth. And that's expected because they had the most time to prepare for this transition. For web browsing, this is the front where I think most people are going to really feel and understand just how fast these things are. When using Apple's Safari, Google's Chrome, or Mozilla's Firefox, I noticed that Pages loaded up very quickly for my main go-to websites of varying quality. When it came to super unoptimized websites that are filled with an abhorrent amount of advertisements that autoplay and promise you that there are hot shingles in your area, those loaded up pretty quick too. Notice that I mentioned other web browsers besides Apple's own Safari, because at this point in time, those two have been updated to run natively off of Apple's Silicon instead of by Rosetta 2. For those who are uninitiated, Rosetta 2 translates non-native apps when they're installed as opposed to doing it as it runs. But it could also do on-the-fly translation if needed, with very minimal impact to no impact at all in terms of performance. Now, on the topic of performance, there are two main areas I can speak of that are massively improved compared to the outgoing model. Aside from the whole speediness of the OS, and that's light gaming and web-based collaborative works. So think of your Google Docs, for example. Starting first with the latter, it's very clear to me that this MacBook Air actually does a far better job in handling those heavy-set loads on Google Drive as opposed to my 2016 MacBook Pro, my actual daily driver laptop. This primarily applies to those long, tedious documents or those Google Drive projects that you have an entire group working on. The ones that are near completion that have too many animations tacked onto it just to make it look pretty, those really slow down my laptop. But on the MacBook Air, I didn't notice that at all, and I'm accessing the exact same files shared with me in a group project. Now, when it comes to light gaming, the two games I noticed immense improvements on were in Civilization 6 and Minecraft. Those are the two games I primarily play because macOS isn't really a rich ecosystem of games to begin with. Now, those two games were installed and translated under Rosetta 2, so these aren't even the most optimized formats of these files. And for both of them, what I can say is there were steady frame rates and it was maintained for the entirety of the experiment. And mind you, this was done all without a fan. Remember, the MacBook Air doesn't have a fan at all. So in the entire review period, not once was my lap abused like the last one. Also, for those in the PC master race, I did not have to scale down my resolution to some potato quality. I got to play a max resolution and kept it around 60 frames per second. Now all these advancements are probably because of the better integrated GPU in the M1 chip as opposed to in Intel's processors. Apple's been making these kind of advancements for years in its A series of processors, those ones powering your iPhone, iPad, or Apple Watch. It's nice to see these graphical improvements finally make their way over to the Mac lineup, because clearly they've been struggling for years. Now if you're the kind of person that isn't too dependent on a certain set of apps or a certain application for your workflow, then these shouldn't be too much of a bother to you, because the vast majority of applications are most likely going to update to run natively off of Apple Silicon, or at least the more popular ones for sure. Apple has this uncanny and annoying ability to drag all its relevant stakeholders and partnerships into the same direction that Apple is looking into, or what they're marching towards. And this is primarily because of their market size in North America, their control of both the hardware and software experience, as well as Mac users or Apple users generally being okay with spending a little more for software. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier about Google Chrome's and Mozilla's Firefox web browsers, how they were updated natively for Apple Silicon, recently Adobe Lightroom actually came out with a native update for Apple Silicon as well. And on top of that, there's a commitment to bring the entirety of the Adobe suite working natively off of Apple Silicon. What Apple is doing here is pulling something off that Microsoft could only dream of when they launched the Surface Pro X. And we're not poo-pooing on Microsoft here. They just didn't have the same kind of clout that Apple does. Okay, so we went over the great and good things about the MacBook Air, and there were lots of good things, but right now we gotta look at the bad. And first and foremost, the thing I found most annoying, especially in 2020, is that the webcam on these things are still god-awful trash. Apparently, the 720p webcam is supposed to be a little better thanks to a new image signals processing unit and neural learning to make images more sharper and clearer. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Hey guys, this is the webcam quality. Here's the video and here's how it sounds with no headphone in. This is most likely what you're gonna look pretty similar to on Zoom call, maybe a little worse because of the compression algorithms they have. Oh, I forgot to mention this in the regular review. The speakers on the MacBook Air, really good. Really like it. Really dope. Here's how the webcam looks with my additional light. There you go. Everything looks better with more light, right? Except for me. All right, bye. Another thing I found really annoying is that the MacBook Air only has 2 USB-C ports. Now they are rated for Thunderbolt 4 or USB 4 standard. Again, having only 2 really limits how far you can push this laptop. And the fact that the entire machine only has 1 Thunderbolt driver means you can only connect to 1 external display and not 2 external displays. Now that may not apply towards everyone, but it applies to me and I care about that. Also, those 2 ports, again, they're just on one side. If they're on both sides, I can kind of forgive Apple for that because then I could charge the laptop on either side. But once again, they're not letting us do that. Also, there's no boot camp support. For those who don't know, boot camp was a way of gaining full-fledged Windows working on your Apple laptops. I'm a person that actually has Windows-specific applications that are most likely never coming to macOS anytime soon. So having no way of running Windows natively off these machines is kind of a bummer. Now, Apple claims that the ball is in Microsoft's court where they could push a Windows version of ARM for Mac users to purchase, but at the moment we don't see that coming anytime soon, and our only solutions are to do it via virtualization, which means we're going to lose quite a bit of performance. And last but not least, probably the worst offender in this list is the configurable RAM. On the MacBook Air line and also the entry-level MacBook Pro and Mac Mini, your RAM options are either 8 GB of unified memory or 16 GB of unified memory. I really do think this is a poor position to place someone in when they're decking out their new machine, especially when all of Apple's marketing is marketing the MacBook Air as a $999 device or even an $899 device, depending on if you have an education discount or not, which most students are probably going to jump on. But what they don't mention is that that really affordable, eye-catching price point is for the 8 GB model. And for a machine you're most likely going to own for half a decade, so all throughout your university studies, or just to have as a machine in the house to do your compute needs and word processing, to be stuck with 8 GB means this machine will not age gracefully. So I really do recommend upgrading to 16 GB of RAM as the first option to upgrade. Now, while the base model MacBook Air, which has 8 GB, works pretty fine with well-optimized apps, not every app's gonna be well-optimized. Not every workflow is gonna be ready for this. And when a normal person starts using this laptop for an extended period of time, and you're doing all your normal stuff in conjunction with Zoom meetings, as well as doing web-based collaborative projects, you're gonna find yourself maxing out your RAM utilization pretty quickly. Again, this is a very poor position that Apple's placing people at the checkout line, but you really should be only getting these in the 16GB models. I believe personally that the reason why 8GB is still there is because the M1 chips share a lot in common with the A series processor still, and given more time, maybe in the next configuration of an M1X or an M2, they're gonna drop the 8GB of RAM model. Because for real computing devices, like a laptop, a Mac Pro, or a MacBook Pro, 16GB is where you should be starting at. All right, so where does this leave us, and who is this for? The MacBook Air, and by extension the MacBook Pro and Mac Mini, are more than just a proof of concept device. Apple's had a long history of designing in-house ARM processors. They've been doing this well with their iPhones and iPads. But what these processors really show off is that the balancing act of picking performance and battery life is slowly coming to an end. Soon, with these low wattage ARM-based processors, we should be able to attain adequate performance or really great performance and stellar or decent battery life. Soon, maybe a few years after the transition period is done, so think of your 4 or 5 year mark from this time on, we can have our cake and eat it too. But until then, if you do get a MacBook Air, measure all the pros, measure all the cons, and add one more caveat: you are a guinea pig. But the one good thing about being a guinea pig in this example is that unlike the butterfly switches, which I still have in my MacBook Pro, you're a guinea pig to a very polished product. Okay, so if you're a person looking for the very first laptop or a computer that can last you all through school, barring any major STEM fields, I believe, because there are a lot of application sets there that you do need Windows for, and at the moment, there's no promise of Windows coming over the Mac OS, you should get this laptop. If you imagine yourself doing a lot of note-taking, this is going to handle that just fine, and it's one of those machines that you can really have a full charge at home, bring it to school, and bring it back to do some homework and get that out of the way without even thinking about needing to charge it again until the next morning. Also, if you're the kind of person that only needs it just for browsing the web, streaming content, as well as you just need to upgrade a very old laptop and it's time for an upgrade, this is a great machine for you. For content creation, I wouldn't recommend the M1 MacBook Airs yet, or even the M1 MacBook Pros. Just wait till the second or third iteration of Apple Silicon, because at that point you should have access to all 4 Thunderbolt ports, and if there are any bugs that reviewers such as myself haven't seen yet, they should have been ironed out by that point on. And you'll have more applications ready to go running natively off of Apple Silicon. Until then, for all other folks, this is a very solid option, and if I wasn't doing these YouTube videos as a hobby, I'd probably be really happy with this. And this color too, space gray. This is the color I like. Silver is a little too plain, and gold still attracts too much attention for me. Oh well, I'm boring that way. This is What the Tech. Thanks for watching, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and cheers to 2021. We're almost there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.